So a little bit about what we're going to do today. We're going to start off just in this keynote talking about where we've been, where we're going, and then how we're going to get there. So this is from the perspective of analytics. In general, it's a little bit from the perspective of Cognos analytics. We're going to play a quick game before I hand things over to Ryan to do a lot of the talking in our keynote here, which is name that Cognos. So we're going to be looking at those three guys in the back of the room, but let's start with our first slide here. Name that Cognos. Throw out some guesses. It looks a little different than what I remember looking like, but someone made it look pretty there. It is impromptu, yes. Which version? No, I don't know which version. All right, next slide. Okay, name that one. This one should be easier. Power play. Everyone knows that one. How about that?
All right, this is enhanced functionality for version.
This came out, so this is a version question. It's impromptu, but which version? It's 7, so it's the latest. I think it was like 7.2. All right. So we're kind of progressing along. That might help. So after 7 we have, this actually is Transformer. You actually can't tell which year or which version because it hasn't changed in about 15 years. What about that? I heard it. Yell it. Yeah, it's Cognos 8. You can tell by that nice gauge and all the widgets. That was a new addition in Cognos 8. After that we have, oh wait, no, that's actually Oracle now. Looks like it could be a Cognos 9. Sorry, next slide. And then what about this?
Should all be very familiar with this version. Cognos 10. There you
Yeah.
go.
And last, but actually this isn't last yet. Anyone recognize this? Where's Greta? She should know. Close. Is Greta in here? Insight. If you don't know, Greta, when Insight came out, won a Honda Insight with the Driving Insight with Insight contest. So she is the only person in the room who knows that tool. And then last, I think, this is last. What do we have here? Cognos Analytics, Cognos 11. So that is through the years of Cognos if we progress along. Now we're just going to talk about how we got through those years. So I'm going to hand over to Ryan.
Sure, thanks, Dustin. So Cognos through the years. This should be a stroll down memory lane for a lot of us. So the first kind of major thing we want to talk about with Cognos through the years. Okay, 1990. I am 8 years old. And Cognos actually invents OLAP with PowerPlay. So I was doing some research. I didn't realize this, but PowerPlay was the first OLAP tool, which explains why it was so awesome that to this day, you know people who refuse to stop using PowerPlay client. Yeah, from 2000 to 2005, we really get the era like Cognos becomes Cognos, right? So this is where we get the core pieces of Cognos that you're probably all most familiar with today and are still using. In addition to PowerPlay. So that's going to be, of course, Framework Manager, your Transformer, and your Report Studio. So I'm just curious, like, how many of you would say 90+% of what you do is in these three tools? Yeah, I mean, it's 90+% of what I do. So between 2005 and 2015, Cognos stays Cognos, okay? IBM added a lot of new stuff. A lot of it was very cool, but really kind of the new features that we got in that earlier period really formed the bedrock of what Cognos was, and like we discussed, to this day, that's what we're doing. Then we see, from 2015, of course, this is when Cognos Analytics comes out, Cognos evolves. So that's part of what we want to talk about at Bacon this year. The new version of Cognos contains a couple bedrock features in the same way that Framework Manager, Report Studio were bedrock features of, Cognos's 6, 7 through 10. Data modules and dashboards in particular, but also stories, are really kind of forming the bedrock of where Cognos is going. So that's one of the messages that we have. Some of you are probably on Cognos Analytics, some of you aren't, but you really, these features are things that we need to start thinking about how we incorporate into our Cognos practice. Just as a kind of a piece of information, we had a partner meeting with the product manager for data modules, for example. And he was telling us that Framework Manager is always going to be there. It's not going away. But all new features are going to be in data modules. And his advice to us was, when you're building new analytics, do it in data modules first, and only use Framework Manager if data modules are lacking a feature that you need to accomplish the task. So these bedrock features that we're going to be utilizing going forward. So why did Cognos follow that path? Well, Cognos evolved with the landscape of analytics. So in the late 90s, I like to think of this as the era, not just of Lincoln Park, but also the era of old school self-service, when we really saw a huge explosion, in particular power play, or as I like to call it, the original Tableau. So for those of you who don't know, back in the day, what we did with power play was, hey, install it on somebody's desktop, it's a business user, they go ahead and they build their own stuff and they don't have to call IT, and it sounds like a very familiar message, but you're probably not used to hearing it delivered along this product, right? From 2000 to 2012, this is the era of big BI and data warehouse. So this is probably what we're most familiar with here. We got centralized IT development. We've got the single view of the truth with a single BI layer on top, really as kind of the focus of everything that we're doing in business intelligence. And to this day, this is what I'm most familiar with. Most of my clients are most familiar with this. So it's been the way that things have been going for a long time. But that kind of brings us to the present day, which we really see kind of emerging of the two, giving you the best of both worlds. That's what you see in Cognos Analytics when you compare the Report Studio and Framework Manager features with the newer data modules and dashboard features. So we're seeing the big BI and data warehouse piece fills a critical enterprise role, and that's not going to stop. You're not going to stop needing a data warehouse. You're not going to stop needing really good cleansed data that you can rely on. And you're not going to stop needing standard reports at the end of the day, a lot of people, what they want to do is, I want to come in, I got a report, it's got the information I need, I want to punch in some prompt values, hit run, and get that data, right? And that's not going to change, but we do see really an explosion of kind of modern self-service for departmental analytics. So the two are really coming together. They're coming together not just in the Cognos product, but they're coming together in how we think about how we manage our BI departments and how we manage analytics as a whole in our organizations. Another thing I want to hit on, and I think this is important to frame a lot of our conversations over the next 2 days, is what Gartner calls multimodal analytics. So this is something, I know I've actually done part of this presentation for some of you in the past, but it has kind of changed the way we think about how we deliver analytics at PMsquare. So there's really two ways to do it, and they're complementary is the way I would think about it. But you've got the mode one, which is what we've been discussing a little bit that we're all familiar with. Mode one is going to be your IT managed, enterprise reporting, really broad scope projects. A lot of times you're pulling in the data. You might be building a star schema, given the old Kimball method, dusting off your Kimball book, right, and going ahead and doing that. You're really going to be concerned with building a broad platform. It's got, you try to design it up front. It's got all the data anybody could ever want, any question they could ever ask. You can answer with our data warehouse. Governance, a very defined SDLC. The process we're all familiar with. Now the mode two is kind of the inverse of that. It's going to be business-led. It's desktop discovery. In Cognos, it would be people using the data modules and dashboards features. It might be people using Tableau, Power BI. They're going directly against a data source. They're building a personal data model that only contains the data they need to answer the questions that are related to their business. Not a broad platform. When they come up with more questions in the future, they go and adjust the model. They don't try to answer all the questions up front, right? These projects are oftentimes funded through the business, not through IT. So where do the dollars come from? The allocation is coming from, if it's a marketing project, the allocation is coming from marketing, not the IT department. This really informs a lot of how we think about things. We're very familiar with mode one. We've all done mode one in the past. That's kind of the bread and butter of probably most of our careers. This mode two thing is popping up in many people's organizations. And a lot of times the IT team is either not sure how to handle it or is tasked with handling it, but doesn't really Like it's new to them, right? And I have customers who their whole careers are on Cognos, and suddenly they say, someone comes in and says, oh yeah, well we've got enough Tableau now. Now you have to start managing Tableau as well, right? So a big change in the industry. It kind of brings us up to where we are today. We've got these two ways of doing things. They're starting to come together. And as far as where we're going, that's really like the first message, okay? The rapid integration of Big BI or Mode 1 and self-service or Mode 2, right? So the product roadmaps are actually converging. If you were to go to Tableau's website and look at their 3-year roadmap, the features you're going to see are metadata management, security, sharing, auditing, some natural language processing, right? That sort of thing, right? Single version of the truth. Now, what feature set does that sound like? Is anyone familiar with a tool that has those features, maybe, and has had them for the last 20 years or so? Right? And if you look at what Cognos is adding, of course, we've probably all seen the new version by now. What Cognos is adding is what Tableau does. So I'm a business user. I got a spreadsheet. I'm going to upload it into Cognos. I'm going to build a data module. I'm going to join it to the data warehouse on my own and build a dashboard. That's the bread and butter Tableau workflow. So they're really coming together, both kind of from a process perspective, how analytics departments are managing the analytics, but also the products themselves are converging. And we'll have a very common feature set 3 years from now between something like Tableau or Power BI and something like Cognos. Right? We're also seeing this huge growth in new technologies and approaches. So things like Hadoop, NoSQL data warehouses or NoSQL databases like MongoDB, for example, and Spark are increasingly relevant. For a long time, this has been things, I go out and I talk to my customers and I say, hey, are you using these? And they say, no, what are they? And that is slowly changing, right? You're starting to see a lot of traction, particularly for Hadoop, but MongoDB and Spark are really coming on large here. And as we'll see, later in presentations that you can see later today, Spark, for example, IBM is making a huge investment in. So if you've got a large investment in IBM, Spark is something that is worth checking out and seeing what it can do for you, because IBM is going to be integrating it into more and more of their products going forward. Of course, we've got the advanced analytics and machine learning, the Watson thing. We get asked a lot, well, what is Watson? And it's a very difficult question to answer. If you were to ask our IBM reps, they might have a hard time answering it. But the reality is that now if you go on to Bluemix, and which is IBM's cloud platform, and you click on a Watson button, there's going to be 8 or 12 cloud services that you can subscribe to. They're machine learning services, natural language processing services, image recognition services. So that's what Watson is, and it's not something that is in the future, and it's not something that you need to buy a $2.5 million box and install in your server room in order to have access to. You can go and subscribe to it this afternoon and start playing around with it. And of course, all of this is available, as I said, pay-as-you-go cloud platforms. So no huge upfront investment for any of this, really. You could go and, if you're interested in Spark, you can go onto the Data Science Experience, which if you're interested in, I'll be doing a presentation later today, just a little plug for myself there. You can go on the Data Science Experience and you click a button, and 3 minutes later, you've got a Spark cluster up and running. You didn't configure anything, and now you can start programming in Python, for example, and using Spark immediately. The other thing we see happening more and more is, IT is really partnering with analytics experts in the business. So this is kind of that process change that we were talking about, goes hand in hand with the technology change. This is where, in the past, the way everybody did things is you had a huge list of requests, and you would maybe have a governance committee. They would evaluate the requests, and the IT team would do all of the development to deliver on those requests. That's really kind of giving way to a much more collaborative approach, in which the IT is building out the platform and identifying and providing the highest value data, but in the end is providing a suite of tools to analytics experts in the business who are doing a lot of the actual dashboard and report development, because tools like dashboards and Cognos Analytics are so much easier to use than something like Report Studio in the past. And finally, there's been this huge explosion of new technologies. So everybody's familiar with the traditional SQL database. Now we've got NoSQL, we've got Spark, we've got all this machine learning stuff, data science, we've got business-led visualization tools, and we've got old school reporting tools. The real message is use the right approach for the job, right? Something like data modules and dashboards are great, and they're going to meet a lot of needs much more quickly than going through Report Studio like you had in the past. But the reality is you're still going to want to build data warehouses. You're still going to want to build Report Studio reports. So it's a toolkit. You pick the pieces, you use the right tool to accomplish the task at hand. And that's really kind of a big part of the message today is there's a lot out there. It's worth investing in and learning these new tools. When you have them, it's not a huge paradigm shift in the sense that once data warehouse caught on, that's all anybody wanted to do for like 10 years was build a data warehouse, right? You're still going to do that, but you use the right tool for the job. Just an example of what that looks like. So here we have an example, right? The problem, this is a very familiar one, I think, for everyone in the room. Data is very siloed. Metrics and reporting across the organization is difficult or impossible, right? So what's the traditional approach? Well, we're going to build a data warehouse. We're going to model that data in Framework Manager, and then we're going to develop Report Studio reports that are either prompted or distribute automatically to our business customers, right? We're all familiar with that. A new approach might be, let's utilize a NoSQL database to build an ODS, right? So let's get, say, MongoDB, for example, build an ODS out of that. We're going to build Cognos Analytics data modules instead of Framework Manager packages. And then we're going to work with the users to enable them to build their own self-service dashboards and reports. If you ask yourself, how long do these things take? The traditional data warehouse approach, I estimate between 1 and 100 years to deliver value. Or never, right? Whereas with this new approach, it would, 3 to 6 months, you can build an ODS on a NoSQL database and start delivering company-wide metrics, right? Now, you might say, well, obviously, we're just going to use the NoSQL database from now on. Why do we ever have a data warehouse? Well, there are technical things that a NoSQL database is just not going to be good at. And problems that the data warehouse solved, that it's still the best tool to solve those problems. So just because you could build a NoSQL ODS really quickly, as a consultant, I would not always recommend that you do that. But it's worth understanding how to do it and work it in where appropriate. Because as you can see, your cap is 6 months of effort versus 100 years of effort. Another thing we see taking off is cloud, of course, right? So huge uptick in cloud initiatives across all industries. All of our clients are really going to cloud. I think if you were to talk to your IBM rep, they would say the same thing. The traditional objections are still there, but they're really fading away. So for the longest time it was, I don't trust company X, how do I know my data is going to be safe? We've really gotten to the point with all the certifications that the cloud vendors have and kind of a history of success that people are not as worried as they used to be about security in particular. It's not just infrastructure offloading. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with AWS. People are really just offloading servers on AWS primarily, right? But it's also moving your CRM, your ERP, or your HCM to cloud. It's moving your platforms like Cognos or Planning Analytics to cloud. And of course, services, like I mentioned earlier, where you're just going and subscribing to a very specific service that does one thing you need and integrating that into your cloud or on-prem software, right? And one thing that I would say is, most of our new customers, new Cognos customers, when we're talking to them, we would need to talk them out of doing a cloud deployment, not talk them into it, which is a big change from how things used to be in the past. So I'm happy to say, after talking about this for 5 years or so, that finally it's happening. What does this analytics topology look like? Hopefully you can see this. I won't really belabor the point, but the message here is really, all of this works together, right? So your data warehouse and your Hadoop deployment are not in opposition, right? They work together. Workloads that make the most sense in data warehouse go to data warehouse. Workloads that make the most sense in Hadoop go to Hadoop. They can talk to one another. So if you have something in one system that you would like in the other, you can integrate them together. There's no wall between the two. And then there's really a kind of the cloud services really kind of sit in there as well, where, like I said, if there's a particular need you have, hey, we've got, for example, we're an insurance company, we've got claims information, we've got these claims forms coming in, right? And we want to be able to quickly process the claims forms, figure out what's in them, and then categorize them somehow. Well, you could develop an internal app, or you could subscribe to Watson Machine Learning and have Watson do it for you. And from within, say, data science experience, you take that data out of your internal system, load it into data science experience, send it to Watson, get the results set, and then load it back into your internal system. So you could say, score the different claims forms that are coming in, for example. And really, the unstructured data and real-time data, of course, that's the bread and butter of kind of the Hadoop and Spark. I mean, I saw a Spark demonstration one time where Spark ingested 250 gigabytes of data and processed it in about 4 seconds. So think about your data warehouse, your Oracle warehouse, and how long it would take to process 250 gigabytes of data as it's doing 10,000 full table reads, right? So how do we get to where we're going? Well, the first thing is I would encourage you to explore Cognos Analytics features, right? And determine how they fit in your organization. And this is a big conversation I'm having with everybody. I know I've had it with a number of people in the room already. The new Cognos features are different from the old features, and of course there are governance and enablement questions when it comes to letting your users have access to it and how they have access to it. But really start exploring them, get a demo environment set up, start kicking the tires on it and say, how does this fit in to what we do today? Sign up for Bluemix. You can sign up for free, okay? And explore services like the data science experience, like the Watson stuff they have up there. DashDB, which of course has been renamed to DB2 Warehouse on Cloud in a baffling marketing decision, you can fire up a new DashDB instance. 2 gigabyte instance is free, and up to 20 gigabytes is $50 a month, right? So and that gets provisioned almost instantaneously. So you've got some data, you want to house it somewhere, go ahead and sign into Bluemix, fire that up and see what you can do. And integrating something like DashDB into Cognos is very, very easy. And if you're interested in that, we can show you how. Right? Those cloud services offer an extremely low barrier to entry for things like advanced analytics, right? So it's in the old days, you would have to go out and figure out, okay, are we going to buy SPSS? We're going to get some SPSS servers set up. Who's going to manage it? You can go in and SPSS is integrated in a data science experience. You can go in and just fire it up and start using it. So if you've got it, find a use case in your organization for something like that, and just pilot it, because the barrier to entry is so much lower than it used to be that you can get into that pilot and really kick the tires on it and figure out if your organization is ready for something like advanced analytics very easily compared to even 2 or 3 years ago what you had to do that test. If you're in the business, look for opportunities to partner with IT, and if you're in IT, look for opportunities to partner with the business. Rather than just going through your tried and true workflow of submitting your request as a business person and then waiting, depending on the client, a couple months to 3 or 4 years to get your business request met. And there's actually a place I worked one time where when I started, there were requests in our queue for the BI team that were 4 years old. And when I left 4 years later, those same requests were in the BI queue. And when we asked those people, do you still need this? They said yes. So they've been waiting 8 years. I trust that none of your organizations are like that, but that's the reality. Right? Find a new approach to solve old problems. You have a new data problem pop up. Your data warehouse might be the right place to send that data. It also might not. So examine some Spark, NoSQL, Hadoop, see if there's a better way to solve an existing problem than just relying on your data warehouse to do it. And finally, ask us, we can help, right? So if any of the stuff we've talked about in this keynote or any of the stuff you see over the next 2 days, we are happy to come in and help you figure out, even just from a high level, have a conversation and say, hey, I saw this thing, it's cool. What does it really do? I have some ideas. Do you think it might work? I'm happy to have that conversation with anybody here. Thank you for coming, and it's very excited to see everybody here, and I hope this is a very valuable conference for you all. And yeah, thank you.